All right. Thank you everyone for joining. We are so excited that you are here for the Cable Conductor Manufacturing Prize webinar. We're really excited about this prize. We have a great lineup of speakers for you today. We're going to go ahead and get started with our presentation.
All right, thanks. And here are the folks you're going to be hearing from today. As I said, I'm Danny Zimney-Schmidt on the bottom right there. Other presenters today who will be introducing the Cable Prize include Tina Karsberg, Christopher Oshman, Kim-Ai Tran, Tommy Makila, and Emily Evans. We can go ahead and advance the slide here. So just before we get started, just a couple of quick housekeeping items. Everything in the webinar today will be recorded and you'll be able to access it later if you'd like to review anything that we covered today. And if you have any questions during the presentation, please don't be afraid to type a question directly into the chat feature on the right side of the screen here. And then if you have any tech issues, please check your audio settings under the audio tab first. And if you do continue to experience issues, you can contact WebEx support at that number listed here. Next slide. We'd now like to move into a brief overview of the American-made challenges and of the accompanying American. Go ahead and advance the slide, please. So the American-made challenges is a program developed to help energize American ingenuity, empower innovators in their attempt to create groundbreaking energy solutions and turn ideas into reality in a matter of months instead of years. The American-Made Challenges program helps to achieve this goal by connecting teams with the knowledge, resources, access to experts in their field to rapidly transform these ideas into prototypes and beyond. In addition, the program connects participants with DOE national labs, incubators, accelerators, and other facilities through the American-Made Network that will help further their innovations. Next slide, please. And the American-Made Challenges program is proud to host the Cable Conductor Manufacturing Prize as part of the American-Made Challenges, and we encourage all of you to check out other prize programs on americanmadechallenges.org in case you have some skill sets that could be applicable to those prizes as well. New prizes are added quite frequently, so be sure to check back often. Next slide. And now just a brief overview of what the American-Made Network is. So the American-Made Network is a group of labs, testing facilities, investors, universities, makerspaces, and incubators who have expressed an interest in helping all teams competing in these American-Made challenges. And they're going to be an invaluable resource to you and your teams as you move through the Cable Prize. The American-Made Network partners will more be utilized in rounds 2 and 3 of the Cable Prize, but just to give you an idea, these are folks that are actively interested in helping teams as they move through this process. And with that, I'd like to turn over the floor to Kim-Ai, who will take over for the next few slides. Thanks.
Thanks, Danny. So I'm here to talk to you a little bit about the Cable Initiative overall. So Libby, if you could please advance. The Cable Initiative was actually born from a big idea last year within DOE's Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, EERE. And it has a dual meaning, obviously cable for conductive cables, but in the context of this initiative, CABLE stands for Conductivity-enhanced materials for affordable breakthrough Leapfrog electric and thermal applications. So in essence, CABLE is really looking to find the transformative ideas in conductive materials since they're fundamental to nearly all energy use applications. And so we want to apply this Nobel Prize winning science and use the DOE's national laboratory tools to research conductivity enhanced materials. Additionally, we want to develop the electric and thermal applications for these materials and look at not only the high technical performance, but also the affordability of the technology as you scale up on the manufacturing level. And so together that should improve US energy and material efficiency, as well as combat climate change furthermore revitalizing the U.S. energy and manufacturing sectors and creating millions of new jobs. And so as Danny mentioned, Cable leverages the American-Made Challenges Network, but it also leverages DOE's Small Business Innovation Research and Small Business Technology Transfer Programs, so SBIR and STTR, which together enable U.S. manufacturers to really stay competitive by upgrading these fundamental materials and applications with that support grid reliability as well as other energy systems. Next, please. And so as I mentioned, the Cable Initiative has a twin objective here. So if you look at the red box to your right, the main focus of this webinar is, of course, the Manufacturing Prize, which is hosted by the American-Made Challenge Network here. And really what we're looking to do is identify, verify, recognize the R&D that underpins conductivity-enhanced breakthroughs in materials. And so taking those materials, we're then going to try to find applications for them. So through Cable's Small Business Innovation Research, that's where we're going to use SBIR to transfer and deploy those technologies in the form of RD&D. That is research, development, demonstration, and deployment for these Leapfrog applications. So you can imagine materials from nanocarbons, enhanced metals, enhanced nonmetals being used for applications like the grid, electric vehicle cables, motors, electronics, energy storage, etc. And with all of these different ideas in the ecosystem, the next thing we want to do is also hold a workshop. So that's coming up April 7th through 9th to really look at every part of the ecosystem. Next, please. So with all the applications and materials, it's drawn a lot of participation across the Department of Energy, from the Office of Electricity to the Office of Science. ARPA-E is involved, so they really like to fund those big moonshot ideas, as well as our very own Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy. So the Advanced Manufacturing Office, of which many of the panel members are a part of, leads this effort. But we also have participation with the Building Technologies Office, geothermal, solar, vehicle, water power, wind energy, as well as the Hydrogen and Fuel Cells Office. Next, please. And so a quick word on the Big Idea Workshop. It is to be held virtually, of course, for 3 days, April 7th through 9th. And we're really looking to bring together these material inventors and application innovators and encourage partnerships between the material scientists, the product developers, manufacturers, and essentially everyone along the cable supply chain. So that being said, all the competitors in the Cable Prize and the SBIR, STTR Phase 1 FOA are very highly encouraged to go ahead and apply or register for this workshop. And the link to that workshop for registration can be found on your bottom right-hand corner. It's cable-bigidea.anl.gov/workshop. And with that, I think I'll turn it back to Danny to introduce the next part of the webinar.
Thank you, Kamai. Next up to speak, we have Tommy, who will be talking about the Cable Prize itself. Go ahead, Tommy.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Danny. So I will just give the kind of the overview of the prize with the kind of how it goes. We are talking about here on this webinar, and we are in stage 1, but it is actually a 3-year, 3-stage prize. And so the total amount of prize money that's available will be over the 3 years, and the 3 stages will be $4.5 million. And here in the first stage, it's going to be up to 10 winners, $25,000 each, and there will also be a stipend then for the stage 2 conductivity testing for those stage 1 winners. And then there will be up to 6 winners in the stage 2, total money up to $1.2 million. And then in stage 3, there will be up to 4 winners with at least $2 million in prize money. So next slide, please. And so here is just a kind of an overview of the structure and how the stages what they consist of. And in stage one, it really is basically a kind of a paper proposal, and that's how a written proposal that will be judged just on that written proposal. Then in stage two, it will be there will be then electrical conductivity testing on a kind of a lab scale sample. And so that's when the competitors need to produce something to actually compete and be tested. And then in stage three, it will be more of a manufacturing scale sample. And okay, again, there will be conductivity testing, but also some other key properties will be tested as well. So because that is an important part of this prize competition and our goal. But we'll talk about a little more detail on all those things a bit later on this webinar. Next slide, please. And then here are just then the important dates as it comes to the prize now, and this kind of goes through the obviously the latter stages. It's pretty approximate, but right now we are here on the webinar. You see, and then as Kimai said, next week there will be the big idea workshop, the cable workshop, and so we hope you will participate in that, and you have time still to register. And then we will have then the submission deadline for stage one of the contest will be June 8th, and so that is obviously then for those of you who will be participating, that's a key deadline then. But then, like I said, then there will be obviously further deadlines as we get to the other stages and in the process. But I believe that concludes my part. So it's over to you, Danny, again.
Tommy. Up next, we have Chris, who will be talking more about the specifics of Cable Prize itself. Go ahead, Chris.
All right, thanks, Danny. We'll be looking primarily at electrical conductivity goals, and we're basing this on the International Annealed Copper Standard, which was set in 1913. This standard, annealed copper is 100%, silver is 108%, gold is 70%, and aluminum is about 66% of that. Now we'll be looking at enhancements of each of these. Looking at the right side of this screen, we'll be expecting improvements in silver to be greater than 113 IACS, enhanced copper about 109, greater than that, enhanced aluminum about 67, and then nonmetals greater than 50% of IACS. Next slide, please. So we're looking at primarily three classes of materials. The first class would be metals enhanced with nanocarbon materials. The second class would be metals enhanced without nanocarbon or other materials besides nanocarbon. And the third will be nonmetals enhanced with metals. And we can see some examples on the right side of the screen, some images. All right, next slide, please. In addition to the electrical conductivity properties, which we'll be looking closely at in stages 1 and 2, we'll also be looking closely at other properties that will be critical for implementing these materials in practice, primarily mechanical properties and thermal properties besides the electrical conductivity. And with that, we're going to go to the next speaker. Thanks, Danny.
Thank you, Chris. And now I will introduce Tina, who will do a deep dive into what we're looking for in stage 1 of the Cable Prize. Go ahead, Tina.
Hi, everyone. Can you see me? I'm Tina Karsberg, and those are some cables behind me in my background. And I am the DOE team lead for the Cable Big Idea Initiative and the Cable Prize. I see you already have it on next slide. You've already seen the schedule a couple of times, never like this. This is our cable motif, a wiggly cable. The next wiggle, as you've heard many times, but it's important. So next week, we will have the Big Idea workshop. There is a schedule on the registration page if you want to learn, an agenda on the registration page if you want to learn more, as well as in the supplemental slides. Please note that that workshop will not be recorded, nor will the presentations be posted, so be there or be square. The next wiggle, skipping May, is the June 8th deadline for your prize submissions. We deliberately made it look closer than it appears because now is not too early to begin your prize submission package, as I will detail shortly. The final wiggle, again, 2 months later, skipping July, which gives our judges plenty of time to evaluate your proposals and also use them to set the rules for stage 2. Next slide, please. Speaking of stages, here is what we will get done in stage 1. As you've seen before, will be up to 10 stage 1's finalists awarded $25K each. And in addition, each stage 1 winner will get a stipend used for free testing at one of our conductivity testing facilities will be announced in stage 2. We will have at least 2 approved testing facilities geographically separate to cover the country and ensure no one has to ship their samples too far. Contestants can enter stage 2 without being a stage 1 winner. They have to self-fund their conductivity testing at one of the approved testing sites. Again, all registered prize competitors will receive an invitation to the Cable Big Idea Workshop. Register now to save yourself the trouble of looking up the registration URL. So like him, I am strongly encouraging you to go to the workshop and look for potential partners among the SBIR proposers. The SBIR winners won't be announced until May 17th. And other cable and material application experts will be in attendance. Next slide, please. Based on the 7 criteria that are described in the section on technical narrative, you can score a maximum of 6 points per criterion for a total of 42 points, as supported by your video, your summary slide, and your letters of support. Next slide, please. Here is how the criteria are broken out. There's only one affordability criterion for a maximum of 6 points. We think it's a little early to judge too much on affordability of just your paper idea. There are 2 breakthrough material criteria for up to 12 points. There are 3 criteria related to technical readiness, which is always very important for the Advanced Manufacturing Office. Again, there's only 1 criterion for Leapfrog application for a maximum of 6 points. We decided it was a little too early to judge leapfrogness, which is a word the lawyer said I couldn't use. But count on this and affordability to be more heavily weighted in later stages. Next slide. What to submit? Make yourself a checklist of the 5 separate items that you need to submit for a complete package. Everything but the cover page can and will be used to evaluate your submissions. The technical narrative, in my opinion, is by far the most important, which is why it's larger font and bolded. Next slide, please. Okay, there are 8 things that need to fit on your cover page. Most of these items are self-explanatory. Number 4 and number 8 seemed a little bit similar to me, so I added some additional guidance. The short description is really just your slogan, or like cable, it can be the spelling out of your acronym, Conductivity-enhanced materials for affordable breakthrough Leapfrog electric and thermal applications. Or it can just be a simple 1-sentence overview, such as widget X does things to achieve results. Next slide, please. Okay, even though it's okay that your video is not super slick or expensive, I think the rules say something about it doesn't need to have high production values. It really should be well thought out. And definitely don't make it deliberately lame to show how non-slick you are. I've been a judge and I've actually seen some competitors make that mistake and it hurt them in scoring. Next slide, please. This PowerPoint is a good place to repeat your slogan, your acronym, or anything else that's really, really important. Repetition is a good thing for important items. That's why we show you the deadline and the URL 5 times. Next slide, please. In my opinion, the technical narrative is the most important part of your submission. For one, it's a great test of whether you can follow directions. For example, here on the left is suggested content. Provide at least one scenario of energy cost savings and reduce climate impact from using enhanced materials. These savings should exceed any of the additional costs beyond manufacturing a state-of-the-art material. So you better have numbers in your content here, and the savings numbers better